Hey guys, welcome to a special live edition of ManOn2nd. I'm Mike Sunday, joined as always with Joe Fasaro. We're reacting live to the Marlins sweep of the Nationals. The Marlins coming off a 7-4 win over the Nationals tonight to complete the three-game sweep, as I just said. And it comes after a team meeting just a couple nights ago at the start of this series that has caused a lot of controversy. And Joe, I know you're very connected with the team. You give us more background on what you think this is all about, and with the context of the sweep, did the team meeting gather the troops, or was this a separate thing? The Marlins took care of business against a really bad Nationals team, and there's also some big problems in that locker room.
Yeah. But it was very lively to say the least when I went down there on Tuesday. 90-minute meeting. Don Mattingly called it. He keep in mind they're off on Monday. Team came off the 4-game split with the Giants, but things have been brewing to the point where Donnie, like he kind of noted that on the off day, he really felt an uneasiness. That things weren't really good within the culture. So he called for the meeting. And then what we gather out of the meeting is there seems to be some disharmony still in the clubhouse. It turned to be 90 minutes. And to me, I don't know. I know a lot is out there. There could be a bit more that we don't really know. But if it's just about hustle and guys, young players not wearing what the veterans want them to wear coming to the ballpark, it's usually not a 90-minute kind of heated exchange. You had, Miggy Rowe talking about a laxing of team rules, basically paraphrasing. And you get Garrett Cooper saying there's a kind of bunch of nonsense, and then things kind of escalated when the dialogue went with the players in the room. And Don Mattingly was kind of like he didn't know what to make of it. Thought they'd come out flat, and they ended up scoring 12 runs. So that kind of summed it up, right, Mike? I mean, here
Yeah.
they don't know what to expect, and they come out and blow them out on Tuesday, win the nail biter with Sandy in extra innings on Wednesday, kind of took care of business today on Thursday, complete the 3-game sweep. I think a lot of it has to do with if you want to have a a team meeting when you don't like the way things are handled, do it against the Washington Nationals.
Yeah.
So I kind of think that kind of played in.
Yeah, I want to know, like, how much do you think? Because I don't know. I personally think it feels like this is like an annual thing, especially for teams that are struggling. You get the annual air it out meeting. There's a lot of things going on, which in this time it looks like there might be more to it. But as you said, like they did it before a series versus a really bad team. Though they played well, do you think now these next series are going to be more of what came out of that meeting rather than this 3-game sample we just got?
I mean, let me kind of sum it up this way, Mike. And I've seen a ton of team meetings and a ton of turning points. And if they go on this 10-game win streak or something like that, everyone's going to point to the meeting as a turning point. Just in a typical clubhouse environment with now 26 man roster, used to be 25. There's always cliques.
Yeah.
And so you always have, this group of players hangs out, that group of players hangs out. A lot of time pitchers do their own thing. Usually relievers are kind of the earliest at the ballpark because they hit the long toss and get their preparation. Hitters, if they get there early, they go to the cages. So there's not always where they just sit in the, like people might think of a football club, locker room before a big game. Everyone's just sitting in there. But even still in that environment, you have offense, defense, and special teams and so forth. That I think we don't know. A lot of stuff doesn't add up to why Donnie felt the way he did. Because if it's nothing like Coop is insinuating, and if it's Miggy just, acting like, some young guys are, out of line, then this is a very easy call a guy in the office if two guys have to air something out. But this was a team thing. So it almost sounds like once they were airing it out, it made the matters worse. And so I think a lot of it comes down to it's still at the end of the day, baseball is an individual sport, and players are performing or not. So a lot of times, if you get the pitching like the Marlins got in this series, they could get through some team meetings pretty well.
What I found curious about the meetings was the different press conferences between Miguel Rojas and Garrett Cooper. Miguel Rojas seemed like to say like these are the issues we're addressing, and then Garrett Cooper was like, "Oh, this is a bunch of nonsense. Things that didn't need to be said were said." Like, does that seem like there's a disconnect on the veteran level?
Yes.
Like, it seems like there's like some sort of, maybe as you say, clicks, and that's where the disconnection is like just too many different clicks or two different types of pitchers, catchers, whatever it is in the locker room. But it's surprising to see two veterans of this team being like, okay, this is an extreme disconnect here. Like, I think it's nonsense. And then Miguel Rojas is like, well, this is what happened. This is what needs to happen. And blah, 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 blah. So that's what I found like really interesting about that.
Yes, and I think David Sampson kind of tweeted onto that as a former team president that has seen these type of things. Hey, look, whether it's nonsense or some people being overly sensitive, a united team has a united voice when they're talking to the media, which is talking to the public.
Yeah.
And that message isn't conflicting. So, Miggy Rowe has been the unofficial team captain, and deservedly so, and he's been the voice. Now, I don't care if he's hitting 100, 230. He still has a very important voice in that clubhouse.
Yeah.
And you would think that they would at least try to say a similar message. Whether it's BS or not, it doesn't even matter. It's at least you seem like a united front rather than a fractured front. That's why that tells me there could be something more to all this, or maybe Coop's trying to downplay some of what might have been said that could escalate, maybe some friction within there. But I just look back, Mikey, to 2020, the pandemic year, and what was the battle cry? The bottom feeders. They were a united front. Everyone made a big to-do of their text messaging, link, how these guys did everything together. Obviously, it was a Corona year and a pandemic year, but they still kind of held it together. They're going to hold it together right now based on individual performance. And if Sandy's great one night or Cooper's hitting 500 for 15 games, that may hold it together, but that's not really a sustainable, model. And it puts more of the spotlight on Donnie because now he's the manager of this, and he's got to make sure guys are showing up to play. Now, whether you believe in team chemistry or not, then gets overblown or not, your culture isn't overblown. You either play and operate in a culture where everyone's comfortable to perform, or people are sitting around. If you start playing for you, and I think that's what Miggy was trying to say, we can't be playing for our numbers. We got to be playing for a team. And I guess what underlines that, what I liked about this series, and granted it is the Nationals, was there were different heroes basically in this series. And I know, and I mentioned something on the Facebook page on the Marlins Nation, that people were upset that Sandy didn't get the win yesterday. 9 innings deserves the win, right? Absolutely, all that's well said and good. But if I'm a Marlins fan, as someone who's covered his team for 20 years, I don't give a darn about an individual thing right now when you have 7 weeks to save your season. The matter is the win. And Sandy did his part to get the win. And you know what? Maybe that extra innings hit by Aguilar gets Aggie going, and Aggie had a couple of big hits again today. All that matters if I'm the Marlins is how do you get as close to 500 and trim as much as 5.5 games, whatever it is right now, and get by the trade deadline, or none of this matters because the final 2 months are going to be garbage time. So this is crunch time. It's not about anyone's feelings and whatnot. So that's why I'm looking at it as, and I like this, a good team win. A lot of players, it's a lot of good things today. And that should be where their focus is, not on some pettiness.
Yeah, and we can make that switch there to this series. You could argue, though, against Nationals, we'll keep saying that, this is one of their most complete series of the season. We saw Jazz have big nights. We like you said, Aguilar's gotten going. We got the Sandy game. Everyone contributed. The offense went crazy the first game. Everyone chipped in. So you're starting to see, you needed this series, right? Everyone going into, I remember the last time we did our pod, we said, this is starting to get to that time where, you can't keep falling back. And they got to, now they're at 5 under, and with a very important 9 games versus like 9 very tough teams coming up. With this sweep today, did that show you anything going into these next 9 games?
Yes. And what it shows is they open on Friday at Houston with Pablo Lopez going in a tough hitter's park against a very tough offensive team. If they're starting pitching lines up, it comes back to that.
Yeah.
And Edward Cabrera's performance, Sandy just stepping up to a stratospheric level, Cy Young candidate now, not just all-star. And even Trevor today, while not spectacular, 5 innings better than it was. At least you seem to have 4 kind of lined up. So you're going to go into that series. If Pablo can keep it rolling, then some timely hitting. Who knows? You take 1 or 2, in Houston, and you're right back there. Because I'm telling you right now, the Marlins are kind of, where are they going to go? Are they going to fall out of it and everyone be just playing for themselves? And whether they fire Donnie in midseason or not doesn't even matter at that point, which I don't see why they would if you're out of it. What's changing manager going to do? You just ride it out and don't, make managerial change in the offseason. Mm-hmm. The Atlanta Braves are red hot. The New York Mets have been on the West Coast. They've had a little bit of a hiccup their first time. In the end, some concerns with injury with Starling Marte getting a little nicked up, Pete Alonso. We still know their pitching is still depleted. Still, the Mets have a huge lead. The Braves, I think, chopped like 6 games off, something like that, in the last 8 days, something like that.
Yeah,
If the Braves and Mets run away with this, I don't know if the Marlins could catch either of them. Now, what does that make you do? You are only playing for the final, 6th and final playoff spot in the National League. That's that 3rd wild card spot. That's pretty much where you are, because Milwaukee and St. Louis will probably create distance as well, which then the Dodgers are going to win the West, probably big. So then you come down to, you got to be out the Giants. But what if the Phillies, who have gotten hot, the Marlins basically going to be with a bunch of teams. Now, this is where the extra wild card saving the Marlins season. But you're basically going to put all your eggs for one wild card spot. And I asked Donnie about this, and hey, look, I've seen plenty of 162s. And I'm not down there every day, but I get down as much as I can. And Donnie was like, no one's thrown in the towel this year. There's still plenty of time about trade deadline and so forth. But it has to be asked, in my opinion, because 7 weeks is not, it may seem like a lot, but if you went to 10 under, then it's even harder. So we've said this on the pod before, they got to get as close to 500 and probably over it. Because Donnie did say, you can't be a 500 team to be a playoff team. Yes, maybe with a bunch of wild cards, you can technically get in at 81-81 or 82-80, whatever. But, he sees you got to be an over 500 team playing pretty much about 600 baseball or close to it, 550 at least, with the wild card to try to be. And math adds up. You can't just automatically go, oh, well, we're 5 games, we'll just win 5 and they lose 5. Well, you got the Phillies, you got half of the, the bottom half of the National League is still looking at the same things. Arizona has a better record in Miami.
Yeah.
So it's like, and Pittsburgh's not far behind, I don't think.
No. Yeah, that's why I think these next 9, I know it might sound crazy to say this early, still kind of early in the season, is this next 9 or last 12, including these 3 versus Washington, might be the season for the Marlins. Because you play 6 division games, you play a really good Astros team, you can fall bad. You either, go 500, you stay where you are, and you're still within that striking distance of being 5.5 back of that last wild card spot, or you get hot, win 7 out of 10 or 6 out of 9, you put yourself back up there, or catastrophically, you go 1-8 in this span, and that might be your season.
No, you're not overstating it. There's no hyperbole there, and I'm big on not being hyperbolic to just but this is I noted it the other day. There's 5 games where they had, or 4 games it was, the series finale with San Francisco didn't go their way, but the 3 with Washington did. So 3 out of 4, you can't really complain. You'd like the 4 to run the table. But what 5 now? 5 under going into Houston.
500.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you go into Houston, you take 2 of 3. Hey, now you're 4 under. Then you go into you go to Philly and then New York. I haven't seen New York this year, and Philly maybe that's the time they cool a little bit. But still, it's I'm looking at it like you are. We're looking at 2-week windows all the way to the trade deadline, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You or maybe even 10 games. You got to say we got to go 6-4 in these 10 and 7-3 in these, because you put yourself in the 8, behind the 8 ball, where you got to make up ground because the season's moving on. We're getting closer to the 60 game. Where just a couple of nights ago, 110, so about 107 to go, and then once you get to the 62 game and you got 100 games to go. You don't just magically make up ground, especially when you're bunched up with people. So this is crunch time, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think this Houston series will be a great test for them. But I want to touch real quick before we wrap this up. I want to know what you thought about the Marlins pitching this series, because we got that really good Sandy game, and how encouraging, because we know last time we talked about the injuries and not having enough, and you never have enough, and they had to call up Garrett, and like we've had all these injuries, and you need all these guys, but I felt like this series was really promising, and then you get Pablo going tomorrow in Houston.
Yeah, let's start with day one with Edward Cabrera, who we made no bones about it. We wanted Edward up a lot sooner. Very encouraging. 2 straight starts with 6, obviously you can live with,
he's getting the run support.
Yeah, you can live with 26 runs in 2 games. But there's still something to be said about Mike. I mean, he still went 6 innings. How many times have we seen long innings, the pitcher comes out and messes up, or he can't go 4 or 5? I'm very encouraged by Edward Cabrera. Now, again, going to a tough place like Houston, in a couple of days, how does he perform? I had a nice little conversation with Sandy on Tuesday, before he pitched, and I kind of asked him, and it's among other things, I broke the ice with him, saying, "Look," I said, "I know he's new. You're one of the better pitchers, but you might be the best pitcher in baseball." And he goes, "Remember, I told you years ago, my goal is to get that to constantly improve." And then I said, "You're so mild-mannered, Sandy. Like he's very approachable, but you see the real fire and the competitive of him in the game, not so much animated, but his face." I said, "Sandy, when does that game face turn on for you?" And he told me, he goes, and he was sitting there eating some pasta. He was pitching the next day. He goes, "I'm talking to you right now, but you might see my face is already getting a little mad." He said, "I'm already starting to think about tomorrow." And basically, by the end of that night, he was going to be looking to do what he does. So I love that. I always like to ask pitchers, how they kind of prepare, how they, because some guys are really super nice, and others, they come in at they're ready to beat your butt. And he transitions to that. It's remarkable in this day and age to throw 9 innings, like twice out of his last 5 starts. It's a shame he doesn't get the complete game. I would like to see that thing, go there for him. Sandy's just different level. I'm encouraged by Trevor Rogers tonight. So he's going to be big for this, because you got to count that Sandy and Pablo, there's no signs of regression at this point. Yeah. But, Trevor, they've been babying him a little bit too. He pitched June 1, is June 9th, 8 days rest. And he went 5 innings, 8, much more around the plate stuff. The velo could hit 97, but, there's not super sharp in where he is in the zone, but he's going to be big. It's going to be big. Trevor's got to get on track, and they're not really going to have the luxury to just keep working on stuff and giving him 8 days of rest. So what's he going to look like on 5 days in Philly? Because that's what they're going to need him. Braxton Garrett, I think the book's going to be out. I think it's going to look, he's basically a left-handed, Eliezer Hernandez. He's, everyone says 1 pitch the other day. Well, he gave up a grand slam. It wasn't 1 pitch that loaded the bases. And he had, 2 guys on base every inning. And the grand slam came in the 4th. And no knock on Braxton, because he's being asked to come in. But when you're talking playoffs, if we want to talk rebuild, we could, pacify everything. Hey, 3 innings, he did. But if you want to go to the postseason, everyone's got to tighten it up. We could talk about the bullpen separately, but I'm encouraged by the starters, and it's all going to be on the starters because the offense is going to have mediocre. We saw I guess what this series told you and showed you, and the credit to guys like Cooper and so forth. If you're getting mediocre pitching, mash it because that's where you build your numbers.
Yeah.
And when you start feeling that better pitching, well, you got some cushion. So I did like the killer mentality, the add-on runs in this series. That was all good, but it's all going to come down to the starting pitching. And I think they're showing signs that, yeah, you know what? The Astros haven't seen Edward Cabrera. Maybe they saw him in spring training for an inning or two, but they really don't have a long book on him. And now's the time to snipe some wins, with these guys before the book comes out. But it's got to come down to Trevor, Edward, and Brax right now.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. You got to be encouraged though if you're the Marlins, or you're going to feel that momentum when you come off a sweep, and having Pablo this season with Santiago Torres like having a 1A 1B ace. So you got to be encouraged. Like, coming off the sweep, you're coming off 2 of 4 with a good Giants team, and you're going into Houston with Pablo Lopez, and hopefully you get that win, and all of a sudden you start probably really feeling that momentum for them.
Yeah, no question. You have to change. Look, winning cures a lot of cultural issues, and the guys got to figure out how to somehow make it work for them. I always looked at it when people use the chemistry aspect of sports, whether you think that's overblown term. I know a lot of people like to make big things of that. I'm like, look, call it whatever you want. It's just a word. To me, it's fitting parts, because ultimately is how do the parts fit when you're on the field, and you get along well enough that you got your teammates' backs, and you do what you can. But I can tell you this. You're not a playoff team if you're only getting contributions from 2 or 3 people. You're a playoff team when you get contributions from that roster. If you notice, that's what the good teams do. You wait for, and this is where, Garcia, we know he's got to wake up. I don't mind him hitting cleanup because he's your highest paid guy in your payroll on your offensive side. On your, Sandy, I think, makes a little more, but you got to get him going. I mean, you could sit around, you just got to get him going. You don't just hit him ninth. You just got to let him play through it and hope. But I think it's encouraging that Sanchi is kind of now seems to be he's the one doing the adjustments back to the league. But that bottom part of the order is going to have to wake up, and to really, if you're going to start mashing with the Astros, because I tell you this much, as good as Pablo is, if he gives up 4 runs in 7 innings, you're in the game at that ballpark. You're in the game. 4 runs in 7 innings. You can't count on Sandy and Pablo to pitch to a 2 or to a 2.0 or in a sub-2 ERA, because at some point that's going to regress the other way. That doesn't, it doesn't happen too much where you hold a low, that low of an ERA. So the innings are what's going to matter, and the way you keep your team in the game. But that bottom part of the order, Eric kind of alluded to it when we signed off the other day. Keep an eye on Nick Fortes, and we're seeing us struggling. Jacob Stallings. And, do you keep riding Jacob? You kind of invested in him. You're going to have to go with it, but you're going to also have to, maybe he's going 4 days a week, not 6 like it was earlier in the year.
Yeah, it's been kind of encouraging to see Fortes a little bit, the way he's performed the past few days.
Yeah, no doubt. I know we got a hockey game we got to catch up on. So
we appreciate you guys tuning in. It's going to be maybe me and Eric over the next couple weeks. Joe, enjoy your vacation.
Yeah, real quick before you sign up. Yeah, just so everyone knows, I'm going to be going out of town starting tomorrow. I'll be back the day after Father's Day, but I don't know if I'll be doing a podcast then. So Eric and Mike and whoever else, we hope they keep it rolling. But take us out of here, my friend.
Yeah, the non-fathers will hold it down while Joe's on vacation. Joe, enjoy your vacation. Appreciate it, and thank you guys for tuning in.